Hello,
Hello, everyone.
hello, hello.
Hello, Brandon. Nice to see you. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining to our On Culture series. And today we're here with a new webinar about why your best arguments don't convince everyone. So it's a webinar about how to persuade cross-culturally.
Yeah,
And the question is, why do we even speak about national cultures if the world is becoming more open to accepting different cultures, to fighting stereotypes, etc.? Well,
mm,
one thing does not exclude the other. Because, yes, we are speaking about national cultures here, but speaking about national cultures doesn't mean that we are putting all individuals into one pot, but we are seeing where our upgrowing teaches us different norms that we find the right ways to approach or see the world. And by making them aware, we can actually see what options there are of thinking about the world and how we can approach also individuals having this knowledge.
yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. Really, really good. And I think, yes, there's lots of talk about national identities and how we all connect and yeah, our cultural identity is actually very strong. It's not the only part of our identity, but it's a very strong part of who we are and how we approach things and how we go about our work. So yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And speaking of identity, Brandon, would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, my name is Brendan. I'm a cross-cultural consultant. So I work with teams, helping them to communicate better together, helping them to structure their systems better so that they are being effective. And so looking at all the different cultures that come into their teams and then looking at ways of working well together and then putting things in place to make sure that they do work well together. So that's my kind of every day. I do that with workshops. I do it through advisory with clients, working with them over a period of time as they maybe transition, do change management, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. So whilst we're there, why don't you tell us what you do, Karina?
Sure. And just so you know, the slides are not moving yet in case
No, they haven't moved yet. I haven't
they have
started
not
moving
moved.
them. So I haven't started moving them. But if you want to tell us a little bit about you, and then I'll get into the slides.
I will. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Karina Indytska, and I work in the sphere of communication where I focus, on the one hand, on languages and cultures. I speak six languages and have worked in international business and cross culturally for over a decade. And the other sphere is public speaking and moderation. And that being
Mhm.
said, today I will be moderating the session. So Brandon is going to be our main expert here today on the persuasion topic. And I will be here to answer all of your questions in the comments. So feel free to comment anything that comes to your mind and also share real life examples, maybe questions you have, so we can include them in our webinar.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, let me move some slides. Shall I move those? So today, why our best arguments don't convince everyone. So we're talking about this persuading across cultures. So we make a case. We prepare our negotiation, our pitch. We want some more resources. Anything where we need to persuade people, we tend to build an argument in how to do that. Now, the way we build those arguments kind of depends a little bit on our culture. So you can lay out the recommendations, you can start with the numbers, you can tell everybody about the return on investment, everything that, as far as you're concerned, a reasonable person needs so that they can make a decision. But sometimes what you get is faces that look a little bit confused. And that can be really horrible when you're in that process and you're standing there talking to people, realizing that they're just not with you. But you can also lay out your principles first and you can go through the theory, the foundation of your argument. And then at the end of that whole presentation, you kind of get to your recommendation, your ask, the thing that you want. And also, sometimes you can do that, and then you can see that you're just totally losing people on the way. Now, there may be other reasons why that's happening, but one of those reasons is absolutely going to be culture. And it's not that the argument's not a great argument, it's just that maybe for the people that you're pitching to, the people that you're negotiating with, the people that you're in a meeting with, are expecting you to start in a different place. So some people start with the point that the kind of this is what I want, and then some people start with the reasoning, the why. Why do I want this? What have I learned to be able to then get to a point where the recommendation that's starting from two different points, but getting to the same place in terms of you're delivering your theory, you're delivering your ask, but which one do you start with first? Now, there isn't any right there is no one right way of doing this. It all kind of depends on who you're talking to, who are you pitching to, who are you negotiating with. So we're going to look at that today. We've already introduced ourselves. I'm Brendan and Karina. This is our fourth webinar as we work through these scales that based on Erin Meyer's work in the culture map. Okay, so um, when things don't go well for us, we kind of come out, especially if it's a high stakes meeting, a high stakes negotiation, we can come out of that and think, oh my God, they just didn't get it. They just, well, no matter what we said, they didn't get it. Or that moment where you're like, well, they weren't really listening. Nobody was interested. They weren't listening. Or maybe it's like you have this feeling that, oh, well, their hands are tied. They're not able to do anything. They can't give us a yes because they're not able to, or they don't have enough budget. A lot of this is like pushing that kind of responsibility onto the other people. And sometimes that's absolutely right. Maybe they don't get it. Maybe they didn't understand. Maybe their hands are tied. But there's this other part, and it's more to do with us and how we're framing and shaping that argument for other people. So the problem was never really the argument, it was where I chose to start that argument. And so we're going to go into this. So we've been looking at these different scales from Erin Meyer, and today we're going to be looking at that persuading scale. And the persuading scale has two polar opposites, the applications first and then the principles first. And we're going to go into these now and tell you how those work. Um, if we imagine that we have a scale, and in the middle of the scale is kind of like this perfect balance between two worlds, as we start drifting away from the center, we start becoming either more principles first or more applications first. So let's just look at that applications. If you are from a culture that is typically or has a tendency to be applications first, then you are expecting whoever is standing in front of you to give you the conclusion first. So that means they're going to lead with the recommendation and the practical takeaway, and then they're going to give the facts that the listener needs, no more. Once they've given that conclusion, the recommendation, and all of what it's going to do, then they may start building the backstory about where that recommendation comes from. And that's as we go on to that applications first. But if you're coming from a culture where the tendency is to be much more principles first, and as you move along the scale, you kind of get a bit more that way or this way, then you start with the reasoning first. So you build up the concept and the logic before you ever get to the recommendation. Now, if you're from an applications first culture, we all we've all probably sat there and we've listened to a presentation and we're all thinking, when are they ever going to get to the point? Where is the point? I don't know, Karina, if you've ever been in a presentation and you've sat there and thought, gosh, where is the point?
I have definitely experienced this.
Yeah, I think most of us have. Um, And that's probably because maybe we're probably much more from we're on the applications first side of things. Um, but if you're from that kind of principles first, if I start coming straight at you with my conclusion, my recommendations, my instant reaction is, hang on, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. You haven't told me the reasons why this is important, how you got here. And so these are two very different ways of bringing an argument and uh, persuading people to come with you on that journey so that they can say, I get this, let's go with it. So
Hmm.
those are
That's
our scales.
super interesting, Brandon. I just thought we could take this one little moment to reflect on the situations where you even need to convince somebody or to give arguments. Because Brandon is going to explain you soon more about the applications and principles, but take a moment and think about in which cases do you need to persuade? Is it, for example, you talking to your boss and asking for more budget for a certain project? Is it you are the director in the company and you're trying to convince all of these employees to make a change, which we know change management is very hard. So, how do you convince them, especially when you work with a multicultural company? Or do you maybe work with external partners where you need some convincing? Think about it, and then I think you can even imagine better how this applies to you and to your work environment.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. And just to add on to that, things like those negotiations, not just with, but if you're in two business mergers where you're trying to convince
Mm.
somebody, or if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for funding, for seed funding, for projects, how are you convincing? How are you persuading those venture capitalists? Yeah, there's a lot. In fact, every day at work, we're trying to persuade people to do this or to do that or to come along with us on this journey. So it applies at so many different levels. You're absolutely right, Karina, to highlight that. Um, Okay, so let's go in here. So let's look at these applications first. So this is where you are leading with the answer. You give that recommendation right up front, and then you give the reasoning behind that recommendation afterwards. And you only kind of give enough that gives enough context for that person, for the people who are listening to you to understand why that's important. So, you know, that may sound like here's what I recommend, three reasons why. Bottom line up front, we should ship in Q3. Skip to the takeaway, then we can dig in. Let's get to the important thing. Then we can look at why that's important. But I want to know why, I want to know what it is that we're going to do. Um, so it's like you don't make people wait for the point. So if you're giving a presentation, then you've got to, and the people in the audience or the people that you're presenting to are applications first people. They want to know straight up front, what is it you want? What is it we're going to do? And that's the important thing. And then you build your reasoning behind it. Now, typical cultures in this that sit on that side of the scale would be the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, and much of the Anglo-Saxon business world as well would sit on this side of the scale. Remember, it's a scale, so everybody's in different locations, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so then we've got our principles first. So that's where we build our foundation first. We establish the concept, the logic, before we ever get to the recommendation. So we take people on this journey of this is the problem, this is the context. We've done tests and research. We've done and all of that test and research has led us to this place. And this is our recommendation. And this would be a principles first culture, which are typically cultures like France and Germany, Italy, Spain, Latin America, and yeah, much of Latin Europe as well. Um, and this starts with the, let's start with why this matters. Let's not start with the recommendation. Let's start with the why. What's the thinking behind the number? Yeah, before the proposal, I want to know the context. So if you skip that reasoning, if you don't go through that research, and you don't take people on that journey, it looks like you've not done your kind of due diligence. You've not done the legwork to be able to say why this is important. And for some cultures, that's going to be essential. They're going to absolutely want to know that because that's what's going to build the trust for them, especially if we're talking about money. It's like, I need to know that you've done the work here and that this recommendation or this ask that you're coming to me, and you've done the legwork on it.
Mhm. And on the
Um,
other hand, we probably have the also money related topic. Time is money. Yes, America.
mm,
And don't waste my time. Just tell me what to do. Let's move on. We have a lot of meetings today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, those cultures, these trust-based cultures where it's like, show me what you do. It's not about the relationship that we build. It's like, show me what you do. Okay, brilliant. Now show me what you want to do. Let's go. And that's kind of, all on that one side of scales. Whereas the principles first cultures, it's not show me what you do and then show me what you want. It's who are you? Who are you? Where have you come from? Tell me about what process you've been through, and then let's talk about what it is you want. Two very different ways of doing things, and we can misunderstand each other so easily when we don't understand the audience or the people that we're talking to. Um, Now, then we have our holistic thinking cultures. These are cultures kind of around this Confucius kind of philosophical philosophy, where everything is much more about the big picture. And cultures like India, China, much of Asia um, often do their reasoning in a holistic way. And they want to see how all the different parts connect to each other, the relationships, the whole thing before before any commitment is going to be made. So, and this is different to our principles first, because our principles first cultures, they want the theory first. Our applications first, they want to know what you want. But our holistic cultures, they want to know everything, context, big picture, how this all fits together in everything else. There's a fascinating piece of research that was done about photographs of people's faces and uh, Western kind of thinking, kind of these applications first and principles first cultures were asked to describe the people in the photographs. And so to kind of talk about who they think they are and what kind of person that they are in the photograph. And they were just given a photograph of the face. And so a lot of people will start looking at the face, the expression, is the person bald? Does he have a beard? Are they old? Are they young? And start making some assumptions about that person. But when you give that picture to somebody who comes from a holistic culture, they they're not looking at the face. They want to see all of the background. They want to see the full context of where the person is, how the person is in that environment. Are they standing, sitting? Are they comfortable or uncomfortable? It's all about that much bigger contextual picture. So we kind of have these three approaches to how we persuade people. So here we go. Here's our scale: applications first, principles first. Karina, where do you think you are on this scale?
So, taking into account that we've created this presentation and me starting with explaining first why we even speak on culture, about culture, and then why we speak about persuasion. And then explaining everything, or I mean, you explaining everything also, I would say I'm a principles first thinker. And I'm
Okay.
curious whether we have applications first thinkers in the audience who are
Yeah.
thinking, what are you trying to tell me? That would be neat to know. Let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. Yeah. How have I started? Have I started principles first or applications first? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I think, yeah, and this is the thing, isn't it? Is that when we're thinking about, well, where am I on this scale? Where would we position ourselves? And obviously, if you're here with us and you're looking at this, think about where you may be on this. We have to remember that these kind of cultural, kind of national frameworks that we use, they're national, they're not individual, and our individual journeys will will take us and move us around on not just this scale, but all of the scales, where we look at culture, and we're going to move around all the time on here. I think that if you're doing pitching and you're pitching to people, um, often pitches start off with that kind of big, you know, we want £100,000 to invest in our new AI product. Boom, that's application straight up there. And I think people who do pitching, there's kind of like a set process. I've heard it a lot where people say, if you're going to pitch, there's a process. Do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. But that's not true because it really does depend on who you're pitching to. So yeah, thinking about where we are on this scale, um, understanding ourselves first is that first step to being able to then think about how do I approach other people. So let's go and have a little look. Here we go. So here are some national tendencies. And you can see that right over on these applications first, we've got the United States, Canada. So North America is there, Australia, UK, Sweden. It's kind of coming towards the center on these applications first. And then we've got Germany, Russia, Italy, Spain, France, kind of on these principles first. And a lot of this has to do with like education systems. So France, the education system in France is heavily based on this kind of philosophical, theoretical approach where you build your arguments from those first principles, and that's how children are taught in school. Build those arguments from the first principles and get to a conclusion. So people from these cultures have a tendency to approach problem solving and things in this way. Whereas people from the applications first tend to approach it more from the applications first. Right, here's the problem, that's the answer. Boom. Now then, let's work out why is that the answer. Let's work that out later. So two very different approaches. And then, as you can see, these holistic cultures, these Asian cultures, kind of don't really fit neatly into here. And kind of when we're dealing with those cultures, we need to approach those in a slightly different way, as I've just said.
Mhm. It's very interesting because it shows also how the scale cannot be taken in an isolated way, but how it relates to other parts of culture, like philosophy, for example. And here I could relate with the German thinkers and principles first. It's like this culture is also based on philosophical texts, if you look from that perspectives, right? And it's like asking why a lot and academics. And then when you go to the US, entrepreneurship there um, is involves much quicker risk taking than in Germany, who would be rather like a security oriented culture. So it all goes hand in hand, and it's nice to look at one scale and just understand it well to see then how might the people we try to persuade think.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and it when you start looking at these things, you do start to see, yeah, this is very much how people tend to operate, and how cultures tend to be, because we can't get away from. I mean, the research is there's quite an extensive amount of research that helps us to get to these national tendencies. But again, remember that we're all individuals, and our experience also feeds into that. But just looking at these kind of tendencies here, and just picking up on that kind of relativism on the scale. So if I'm from the UK and I'm in negotiation with a German business, for example, my approach would be not to lead with my applications first, but to try and be much more principles first, to try and lead with a bit more reasoning about what the problem is and the process that we've gone through. However, if you see France, France is right at this other side of the scale. If I'm a French person, or if I'm again doing that same meeting with also somebody from Germany, and I'm talking very generally here, just tendencies. Um, I may feel that my German colleague or my German counterpart is actually more applications um, orientated than I am because I'm much further alongside this scale. And this is again just to just to re-emphasize this again. It's why stereotypes don't work, and using these scales to reinforce stereotypes is actually really not good. There is a concept called the ecological fallacy. I'm not going to go into that, but it basically talks about a lot of these scales, especially and Hofstede talked about this. They are about national tendencies. They're not about individuals. They're national tendencies. And when we think about individuals, we have to think about their experience, the job that they do, and their exposure as well to other ways of working and other cultures. So that's kind of our scale there. So let's go. Oh yeah, let me get to a little story of almost disaster in Ghana. Um, but I want to tell you a little story about my time when I was delivering a pitch in Ghana, and I was delivering a pitch to a group of women who were from India. Um, and I walked. This was in a hotel in Accra, or just on the outskirts of Accra. And I walked into the room, and I walked into a room. I think there was 20 or 30 Indian women there. I'm going to be honest with you. I felt a little bit intimidated when I walked in, and I was very conscious that I needed to present myself well and to present my argument very coherently and I'd spent a long time practicing it so that it was in my head and I was a bit relaxed as well. So I wasn't super nervous, but I was a little bit intimidated when I walked into that room. And I was basically asking them to fund a project for us. So I basically did what I do. When I was doing this, I had little or no knowledge of any of the cultural research that I now work with every day. But I went straight in there. Somebody from the UK, very much applications first, and I was like, we need funding for this project. Here is what it will do. This is what it's going to do. It's going to change these children's lives. It was actually to construct a toilet block in a school. Um, and it's going to change these kids' lives. Your money will impact this many children. It will reduce illnesses. I've done research. I've gone to the local hospitals. We taken statistics. It was like, if children wash their hands and have toilets, it reduces diarrhea and deaths by this much. So I've given them, this is what it's going to do. And here are the results. And I showed them results from other projects that I'd done. And I remember standing there and I could hear the waves from the Gulf of Guinea crashing on the rocks behind this hotel. And I remember the words coming out, kind of like this out of body experience. I could hear myself talking, I could see myself talking, but in my head I was thinking, I'm losing it. Then they don't get it. They don't understand. They're not with me. It's all going wrong. Everything was because their faces were like I don't. They were looking at me like I was talking, almost talking another language. Um, and and I went through, but the whole time they kept dragging me back. So they'd interrupt me and drag me back right to the beginning, and they'd say, but tell us about the village where you're going to build this, and or tell me about the children, or give us some tell me a bit more about the school and why this school, why this particular place, why that particular design. And when you start getting questioned in the middle of your pitch, your heartbeat goes up, you start sweating. It was Ghana, I was sweating anyway, but my head was red, it was pulsating, it was a horrible experience. Really was a horrible experience. And they just kept dragging me back. Um, so I kept saying things like, and the impact will be, and the results will be, and the outcome is, and this is why you should give me the money for this particular thing. And what they kept asking me was, but why this approach at all? And who did you speak to about this? Who did you speak to first? And how does this fit into the bigger picture of your organization, of this village, of this community? Which is this holistic approach, and take us back to the beginning. And yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible, and I thought it was a total disaster.
So,
They're not
so
buying
what
it.
happened, Brandon? Did you lose the pitch?
No, I got the money, I got the funding, but I think I got the funding
Oh, nice.
despite my efforts, or in spite of my presentation.
So is this
Um,
the strategy you would recommend us if you
oh
get the
no, not at
funding?
all. Not at all. Not at all. It was the strangest yes I've ever. I went out of that meeting and I was like, I do not ever want to have to do a pitch like this ever again. And I didn't know what the problem was at the time because I hadn't done my research. Um, yes, it was really, really horrible. And that's the thing. They weren't resisting. They wanted to, the reason I got the funding is because they genuinely wanted to help. And even though I had got my pitch wrong, completely wrong, they wanted to help. And as an individual, they liked me as an individual because I'd spent a little bit of time getting to know them. But that moment that I stopped pitching to them and I started listening to them, and I started listening to the questions that they were answering, was the moment when things started to go better. Um, and once I kind of got my pitch more or less there, it was going back to and then answering those questions for them. So allowing them to lead my pitch, basically, I allowed them to lead me because I realized that I wasn't getting it right. Um, and then some of the questions I hadn't prepared for, but I think, well, I must have done something right because I did get the funding, but it was tough. It was really, really tough. Um, so, and so, why were they taking me back? And we've talked about this. They were. I came at it from a very project manager orientated. My background, project management, very direct to the point. This is what I want. This is what I need, etc. And they were bringing me back to this holistic picture. Why? Give me context. Help me to understand. Um, so this is this kind of that friction. I didn't know any of this. I was thinking while I'm standing there, they don't get it. They don't want to give me money. They're wasting my time and I'm wasting their time. Yeah. It's like they've already made a decision before I've even walked into the room. This is what I'm thinking. This is all of this kind of hidden friction, you know and that trust between us, it kind of needed to build slowly, and they weren't trusting me because I was just coming at them, give me your money. I want your money. um, and so when we don't manage that part of our presentations, of our negotiations, that's when things start to quietly die and quietly don't work, and we don't quite get the feedback that we wanted or the answers that we wanted. But if when we're preparing for these kind of negotiations, these meetings where we're persuading, if we bring this aspect into that preparation, that's where we get this kind of strategic advantage, where we start thinking about the people in that room. We start thinking about what are their expectations, and that's when we start to build trust. People trust us when we talk in the way that they're expecting us to talk, in the way that they understand. And that trust gets built. So if I'd have known anything about principles first when I did this, I would have approached this in a much different way. I would have shown them pictures of the village. I would have shown them pictures for children. I would have gone with the bigger holistic context. Um, and so when we manage it well, when we think about it and design it for the people who are going to be listening to us, that's when our best arguments land well. And that's when people connect and they get what we're trying to say. Um, so how do we persuade? So I'm going to go through this kind of three ways that we can kind of adapt to persuade well. Um, think about the people in the room. So before we build an argument, what are those people expecting? Um, Again, we're all individuals, so a lot of people will have experience of things being done in certain ways. Um, but if you're pitching to a kind of a group of people who are working within their culture, um, and their exposure to other ways of doing things, um, is quite low, then we have to think about what their natural defaults might be. So we need to plan to meet the needs of the people who are going to be listening to us. So, you know, do they jump to so what do we do? Or do they keep circling back to why? In my presentation, the women kept circling back. Why? 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 That these are key things to be listening for. I didn't realize at the time, but now if someone says to me why, that immediately tells me that they want to know much more about the principles before I get to my ask. Um, yeah, and look at what really gets the nod. You know, is it because you've made a really great recommendation? Is it, or is it because you're giving them context, you're taking them on a journey? What's getting the positive nods, the people looking at you engaged? That gives you an idea of where to shape your argument. Um, yeah, and assume relative, not absolute. You only kind of need to know where they sit compared to you. Yeah, I'm British. I'm much more applications first, and my Indian women's group much more holistic and principles. I didn't know that, but knowing that would have helped me because I would have understood exactly what was going on in the room um, that time.
Can
So
I add
that's
something to this?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what's also interesting is when we understand these national dynamics, of course, national dynamics show in company cultures, and company cultures are just bubbles within bigger cultures, right? So it can also be true that we have a company that is based in Germany, but that has a very US American company culture because maybe the headquarters are there or because all the CEOs are US American. So what happens is that the company culture becomes, let's say, very application first, where the standard of talking is we start with the what needs to be done, and if we need more explanation, we explain to you the background. And this can happen although we are in Germany. So that can also help you if you're managing a team within a company culture or your team members. They are all used to certain standards or norms, then it can also give you insights. Although maybe these Indian women are based in Germany and um, they're so influenced and know they know that in this context of this company, we speak application first. So you can try to consider more cultural bubbles there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, spot on. Yeah, there's some of my clients based in Spain here. Spain is a principles first culture.
Mm.
They are clients that have had extensive exposure to much more applications first culture, and they understand that may be how people are going to approach them. So there's a lot more flexibility, a lot more appreciation that maybe I'm not going to get it quite the way I want it, but it's not going to stop me from engaging. So we need to, yeah, again, so understanding really, doing our research. The thing about this is that it means that you need to kind of have a dynamic approach to how you're doing your presentation. You know, listening to people, listening to where they're also taking you, and saying, okay, I need to shift a little bit more towards being principles first here because that's where the questions are taking me. So don't resist that. if people are asking you principles first, it's because they're probably thinking, I need to know a bit more about the context here before I start even even thinking about giving a positive answer. So yeah, think about those people. Think about how that room operates before we get into it. So structure for the listener, not for us. We tend to plan our presentations based on our own experiences, on our own strengths. There's nothing wrong with that, but there has to be some there has to be an element where we think about, okay, I need to think about the person that's listening. Every presentation that we do is actually designed for the people that listen. That's the whole point of a presentation, is that we want something to those people to take something away from what we're saying. So we have to always have the audience, the listener, the person we're talking to in mind. Um, so for those applications first, that's a recommendation up front, then just enough reasoning to kind of substantiate that recommendation. Um, but if you lead with the context and the recommendation is wrapped up in the context somewhere, those application first cultures may not even hear the ask, what it is exactly that you're asking for. They may not hear that at all. And they may walk out of that presentation going, I've no idea what this guy wants or what this woman wants. What do they want? Whereas those principles first, it's get that concept and logic in there first, kind of do the work to earn the conclusion. Um, and then that conclusion then kind of sits on top of all that foundational work that's been done. And for those holistic thinkers, give that whole picture, context, relationships. As I said with my Indian women's organization, if I'd have known that, I would have shown pictures of the projects. I would have given them the names of the people, helped them to understand how long we'd been working in that community, all of this. So that's structure for the listener. And then become bilingual in persuasion. So that's keeping your natural style, but learning to operate in another register when you need to. Yeah. So leading with the pointer and the path. Signposting both. So this is basically this kind of adaptable, flexible, being able to have my left foot over here and my right foot over here, and being able to bring both of these elements into my presentation or my pitch or my negotiation. Um, and yeah, so one of those things, Karina, I think we were talking about is how do you do it when you've got a mixed room? Is when the room is mixed, and because for a lot of presentations the room is going to be mixed. For some it'll be just this kind of monolith of culture maybe, but for a lot of presentations we have people from lots of different cultures, and they're all requiring different things. And one of these things I kind of talk about is this foot in left, the foot in the right part, being able to move between the two. So if I'm naturally applications first, instead of me giving all of my recommendations, all of my return on investment, all of my conclusions here, I'm going to give one, and then I'm going to bounce back over here, and then I'm going to give a little bit depth behind that and a bit of context, and then I'm going to give another point over here. So I'm hitting my applications first. People are feeling like, yes, he's talking to us. I'm not having to wait 30 minutes before he gets to his point. But my principles first people are also thinking, okay, he's giving us some context here and some reasons behind it. So I'm trying to keep everybody in engaged, yeah, as we go. So I'm kind of bouncing from one to the other. And this is this kind of being bilingual in persuasion, just when that room kind of takes you backwards, it's not usually rejection. It's just that they need to hear something different. And they want to hear the bit that you've not said so far. And then slow down. There's nothing wrong with asking questions before you finish your presentation. There's nothing wrong with giving people an opportunity to say, actually, could you just open this up a little bit for me before you hit that? Here's my big ask. And it just gives everybody, those people that need that clarification first, gives them an opportunity to get that before you kind of repeat your ask. So those are kind of three approaches that I would take um, into those kind of situations. So think about the room, structure for the listener, and try and speak both registers if you need to hit two different styles of doing things. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of our thing. Karina, do you have anything to add or any questions in there?
For now, not. I found it very interesting. And yeah, I think during the presentation, I really realized that we were going very principle first. So this is, I mean, we are aware of cultures and also self-aware, but I think every time you do something new, you become more aware.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting. And yeah, I can always learn from you, Brendan. So that's great.
Well, we are all learning, and I learned from you too as well, Karina. That's the thing about working, and especially when we bring this culture, we are always learning, always reflecting. I always say to the people to people that self-reflection is probably one of the most powerful things that we can do to reflect upon how we operate. Knowing
Definitely.
ourselves is, yeah. So if you want to know a little bit more about how you operate in terms of your kind of communication style, where you are with your cultural intelligence, we have a kind of a very basic free tool that you can use. The URL is there on the screen. Click that, answer a few questions, and it's going to give you a snapshot, an idea, a starting point of from where maybe you are as an individual. It's totally free, and it'll give you a report as well that will get emailed to you. So that's a free resource for you if you want to have a look at that. Okay, we got any questions and answers? I think you're good, Karina. Yeah, you're okay.
I'm good.
Um,
For now, I don't see any questions in the chat, but feel
okay.
free to reach out to us later. Maybe that's a lot of process now and you're still in the reflection phase.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then just to tell you about our next, well, I don't know, Karina, do you want to tell them about the next webinar?
Of course. So, next time we're going to speak about the topic of leadership and different leadership expectations we have and how that affects us as team members, but also as leaders and can lead to positive or negative outcomes when we're working together. So it would be great to see you all there and also have different cultures represented in the audience so we can hear different opinions and perspectives.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's going to be really good. And I think you're going to lead on that, Karina, is
Yes.
that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So Karina's going to be leading on that. And that's on the 17th of September um, at 6 o'clock. Yeah, 6 o'clock Central European time. Okay, well, that's us. If you want to connect with us, you can scan those QR codes. I think that's going to take you to my LinkedIn page. I think it's going to take you to your LinkedIn page as well, Karina.
Yes.
So if you want to stay in touch with us, connect with us in LinkedIn, we'd be really happy to hear from you. Any questions, any comments, or anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. That would be wonderful. Okay. And then that kind of like just leaves us to say thank you very much. It's really great to have had you here. If you're watching the recording afterwards, thank you very much for taking the time to see this. We hope that it's been helpful and useful. Um, and again, if you have any questions or any comments, something you're not sure of, or even something you disagree with, please do share those with us. That's where growth happens when we share our experiences and our views, and we then go through a process of learning together, which for me is a super powerful way to learn. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Excellent. Bye bye.